Today's episode of the Nick Taylor Horror Show is brought to you by Deadly Grounds Coffee. It's the #1 choice of horror fans worldwide. Nothing starts your day or night better than a delicious cup of Deadly Grounds. Whether you're hunting ghosts or fighting the next zombie apocalypse, any one of Deadly's 30-plus roasts will bring you to caffeine nirvana with the richest flavor you've ever had. Whether you're craving their Hellhound Roast, Witch's Brew, Devil's Night Roast, or Sinful Delight, order online at getdeadly.com for easy and safe shipping right to your door. We know that once you go deadly, you won't go back. Join the deadly revolution today. Be bold, be different, be deadly. Deadly Grounds Coffee. Coffee to die for and zombie approved. Get some at getdeadly.com. Welcome back to the Nick Taylor Horror Show. Josh Miller is a household name in the horror community. An American filmmaker, writer, director, and actor. Among other things, Josh created the Fox animated series Golan the Insatiable and wrote the script for the Sonic the Hedgehog film and directed the cult horror comedy Hey, Stop Stabbing Me. He's the co-host, along with Stephen Scarlata, of the Greatest Movies Never Made podcast, which showcases some of the most interesting movies that never got to see the light of day. Big fan of that podcast, by the way. I caught up with Josh to talk about his overall career, writing processes, and how he got to write an enormous studio picture like Sonic the Hedgehog on today's episode of the Nick Taylor Horror Show. Now, please give it up for Josh Miller. Josh Miller, how are you, sir?
I am good.
So how did your career in screenwriting begin? How did you get to the point where you wrote something as enormous as Sonic the Hedgehog?
I mean, the funny thing is, it took well over a decade, but we got Sonic. Basically, I can directly string together the chain of events. Was we made a movie in college for $500, and that's not an exaggeration. We spent almost nothing on it, but it was a feature-length movie called Hey, Stop Stabbing Me. Mm-hmm. Just, this was during kind of the height of DVD format, where we somehow found a boutique DVD distributor, really tiny, but was just kind of looking for anything. I think just the fact that it was a feature-length movie. I think it was pretty funny. The film itself turned out good, but it undeniably, didn't star anybody. I think I'm a pretty good director, but we don't know anything about lighting. I know how to direct. I don't know how to do cinematography or videography, so it kind of looks like shit. But it got released on DVD. I don't even know how many copies they released, maybe 500 or something, but a couple old websites reviewed it, and this company called Snoot Entertainment, who are still around doing fun stuff. I guess for horror listeners, Keith Calder and Jessica Wu run the company, and I think they're best known to horror people as they kind of, I don't want to say discovered, but they did all the old original Simon Barrett, Adam Wingard movies Year Next and
right.
But when they were just starting out, they haven't even made a movie yet, Keith read about Hey, Stop Stabbing Me on some website, decided it sounded like fun, found a copy, watched it, liked it, tracked Pat and I down, and was like, let's make a movie together. We never did make a movie together. We're still trying to, all these many, many years later. But I'm trying to think of the fastest way to tell the story. But through Keith, we met a guy named Dan Belgoyan, who works for a company called Depth of Field, which is a company of, the Whites brothers. They did American Pie and About a Boy. Mm-hmm. And not broke up. They're still brothers and still run a company together, but they used to be a directing team and then kind of went off to do their own things. But Dan was always oh, sorry, I even skipped a step. The website somethingawful.com?
Oh, yeah.
So they apparently were also fans of our stupid college movie, Hey, Stop Stabbing Me. And they reached out to me being like, hey, would you like to write anything for our website? And this was like during like a real lull in our actual writing careers. We hadn't gotten a lot of projects going after initially having some luck with stupid college comedies.
Mm-hmm.
But I wrote some stuff for their website, and one of them was this reoccurring character named Golan the Insatiable. And Dan at Depth of Field was always like, you guys should turn that into like an animated show. But first of all, we were only doing movies at the time, and they were independent movies in the most literal sense. I feel now when you say indie movies, people think like Sundance and kind of art movies. But I just mean like they were funded by like a group of dentists, like that kind of independent. And we're like, we don't know how to do anything legitimate, much less get an animated TV show going. But at the time, Fox was trying to basically do their own version of Adult Swim. And Dan got me in there to pitch a TV version of this character, which shockingly they ended up doing. And it was on Fox Saturday night, late night, very briefly. We only ended up we did 2 seasons, but it was only a total of like 12 episodes. But that, much like Hey, Stop Stabbing Me, was kind of like it had no high profile. Most people don't even know it ever existed. But some people saw it, and the people who saw it really liked it. And one of those people was a guy named Toby Asher, who's a producer for Neil Maritz's company. And they were the ones who were making the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, even though Golan the Insatiable was like an R-rated, like adult animated TV show, he thought that it would be fun to have guys like us write the Sonic movie. It wasn't as simple as that. He brought us in for what I like to call a bake-off, where there's like, you never even know how many other writers competing.
Right.
But I'm sure there's like a dozen writers pitching on it, and you just kind of keep making it further and further in the process. And eventually, I guess we won, you could say.
Well, that's great. Yeah, and huge congratulations. And I mean, what I really liked about the movie
Sorry that was such a long roundabout way.
No, that's what we want. We want the big, long stories.
Actually led to getting something like Sonic, so.
Yeah, I feel like it speaks to the importance of just putting something out there, having some sort of a calling card, whereas a lot of people sit on hypothetical scripts that they may or may not write, or movies that they've always wanted to do.
I don't know that I necessarily have tons of super practical advice, because it's so crazy how all the different ways you can like break into the industry, but just making stuff and getting it out there, even if it's just throwing it on YouTube or, writing short stories and just starting your own website that all it does is have your short stories on it. It's like you never know how someone is going to find you.
Right.
And again, just the fact that, because it's funny, because that story I told, like, that was like probably maybe even 15 years worth of things happening. Like Keith, the guy at Snoot, he hit us up about Hey, Stop Stabbing Me shortly after it came out. But then it was like 8 years after that something awful hit me up about it to write stuff where I created one. So, it obviously can be disconcerting if you put something out in the world and there's no reaction to it, but you never know. There might be 8 years, 10 years, 20 years later.
Yeah, there's a real just long tail effect.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, huge congrats on Sonic. Really, what I really enjoyed about it was I feel like I don't have kids, but if I did, I could show them this movie. But there was a lot for adults to enjoy. It kind of hit that Pixar balance of there's a lot of humor here for adults, but then there's also it will keep the kids happy, and it's relatively squeaky clean for the most part. Was it difficult to write according and kind of walk that tightrope as you wrote?
A little. I mean, we were writing the movie because it started at Sony and then moved to Paramount. And when it was at Sony specifically, one of their initial kind of like notes, I guess, was just that they didn't want this to be like, Alvin and the Chipmunks or the Smurfs. So we were kind of writing it like it was going to be PG-13. Mm-hmm. And then when it moved to Paramount, Paramount, I mean, they didn't want to like water it down necessarily, but they were very much like wanted to make sure it was PG. Um, and so that was more of like a back and forth process where it's kind of like you strip out everything
Right.
that might make it PG-13, but then everyone kind of looks at it and they're just like, well, now this seems like it's too little kiddie, and you kind of go back and forth. Kind of, I'd say, kidding it up and then adulting it up.
Right.
And fortunately, we had Jim Carrey, which we knew was always going to appeal. I mean, hopefully to kids because he's so funny, but to adults of a certain age who grew up with him and kind of missed the 90s era Jim Carrey.
Oh, so you knew he was cast already when you started writing?
Not when we started writing, just, I mean, because there was basically, we wrote it and there was a script and it was done. And then it moved from Sony to Paramount, and Paramount kind of immediately greenlit it. So it was still getting rewritten even as they were casting it. So there was definitely the point where Jim Carrey got cast.
Right.
And it's kind of, oh, now to like really Jim Carrey it up.
Right, yeah, because it did feel like 90s era prime Jim Carrey. It felt like it was just written to play to that side of him, which was really enjoyable. As I was a kid in the 90s, so yeah, that was extra fun.
Oh, we were so excited.
Yeah, that must have been super exciting. So, how did you kind of craft your screenwriting ability, or how did you essentially learn the ropes of screenwriting?
I mean, what's the saying of, you need 10,000 hours to like master anything? That Pat and I, my writing partner, always say that that TV show we had in high school, that was our 10,000 hours. And then even unrelated to him, I started, I don't know why, I have no real good explanation for why my brain worked like this as a kid, but like I didn't know what a short film was, as stupid as that sounds. You just go to the movies, rent movies. To me, that was a movie. I don't know I don't think I'd seen a short film really until I got into college and understood that that's usually what you do if you're trying to like break into anything or get good at it. Is you make shorts and you get better and better and better and better, and then you make a feature. I just started making feature-length movies when I was in junior high.
Whoa.
Sure, most of those were unwatchable. Now looking back, I'm like, oh, I get why you make a short film. But that was just, I think what was good about that then is much earlier I had to start thinking about how do you write a full-length movie, which I think helped. The one downside I would say I see people who only made short films for a really long time is that when you then have to jump to doing a feature, it's so different to tell a story for 8 minutes versus 90 minutes.
Right.
And yes, it was really just a lot of trial and error that thankfully no one else can see. Those were not movies that will ever be released to the world. Cool. And then another thing was I went to the University of Minnesota, which didn't actually have a film program. So my film studies was like an interdepartmental major, they call it, where it's basically just kind of like every college, like the German department will have one German cinema class. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of just this weird cobbled together major. But I had one class taught by a guy named Tom Pope, who I guess was kind of a unsuccessful screenwriter, you would say. He had some like produced credits, but it's the kind of stuff that most people never really heard of. And he was now back in Minnesota teaching classes. But he'd written this book that I've never heard anyone else talk about, and I haven't read it since college, so I don't know. Maybe it's not actually a great book, but I thought it was really educational, and it was called Good Scripts, Bad Scripts. And he was really obsessed with like story structure, which is the kind of thing that up until then, even though I think I'd slowly been just again from trial and error of making these awful feature-length movies, I was slowly understanding of like, oh, it was really monotonous when I just had that same thing happen for 40 minutes. Because at that time I was just like, a movie's 90 minutes long, so I just needed 90 minutes of just garbage. But Good Scripts, Bad Scripts was very much highlighting like, now it's like, Save the Cat and all that stuff.
Right.
I guess are better known, but I had never really thought about it or seen it broken down and explained to me in those terms. And it wasn't so much about act one, act two, act three, but just kind of like about pacing and the kind of things that you need to have happen by certain points in your story. And then I remember one thing that really stuck out in my head, and that was because I loved the movie Fargo in part because it was shot in Minnesota, where I'm from. But he used that as an example of kind of the mastery of the Coen brothers, because that's like an example of a movie that you should never attempt to follow. It was kind of the idea that they're so good that they can break with format. And the example of that, which I hadn't even thought of while watching the movie, was that Frances McDormand, who's ostensibly our protagonist, our hero of that movie, you don't even meet her until 40 minutes in.
Right.
Up until then, we've just been spending all this time with who are basically our villains or just, antagonists. And just that kind of stuff like blew my mind. Things that all seem really obvious once someone points out to you, but some of the best educational things often are obvious once they're pointed out to you.
Yeah. So do you try to adhere to any sort of daily minimum when it comes to either words written or pages written in a Stephen King style fashion as far as your writing practice goes, or is it all just based on the project?
I've done a few books, not like narrative prose fiction, more of what I would call bathroom books, just weird novelty things I did many moons ago. And that was the only time, because there was a deadline, and that type of writing is so much different than screenwriting. I really get why people like Stephen King and other authors talk about getting up and getting a certain number of pages or words, or working for a certain number of hours, because they have to produce so much more content.
Right.
You really do need to get a regimen. I definitely think you should have some kind of regimen. It helps that I have a writing partner, so we need to get together. And over the years, we basically just decided we were going to treat it a little bit like a 9 to 5 job. We don't actually get together 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'd say maybe a little more 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. But we get together Monday through Friday. And we're often not productive whatsoever. And we've gotten very good at realizing when we're not being productive. And that's when we'll usually just kind of fuck off for the day and go see a movie or rent a movie on iTunes or, whatever. But even that, it's as long as we're thinking about movies, we think that it all kind of adds back into the creative pot. But I mean, for us, it's usually just someday we won't get crap done. And then the day after that, we'll get an insane amount done. Which is a roundabout way of saying, no, we don't hold ourselves to minimums, mostly just because we don't have to. It's we have a deadline, and they kind of don't care. If they give us 2 months to work on something, they don't care if we wait to the last 2 weeks to write it, as long as it turns out okay.
Right.
So we're very much just whatever you need to do to get it done. I mean, it's kind of funny that even at our age, we're still very much will do the college, my paper's due tomorrow, cram sessions of oh no, the movie's due on Monday. And we basically kind of write the whole thing in 3 days.
Right.
After kind of pretending to be working on it for weeks on end, where we're really only getting one scene done a day, if that. Today, I wrote one scene and it wasn't good. So
well, you got it out of your system. I feel like part of it's
that. Exactly. And then tomorrow will be a better day.
Yeah. Well, it feels like a real fortunate thing to have a writing partner. How do you guys kind of work together in terms of who does what? Is there any sort of what kind of are the keys to the complementary nature of your partnership? Because clearly there's something very complimentary about the dynamic that you guys have together. What is it that makes that work?
Well, I don't think it's a coincidence that most successful writing teams are brothers or people who grew up together. I'm always amazed when I meet people who are in their 30s and became writing partners with somebody last year. Not I don't wish them well, but I'm always just kind of well, good luck. Because I think you need to be brothers or like best friends or like a married couple or something. Because in some ways, it's kind of like you need to have already worked through whatever bullshit to like move past. Because it's like we don't really argue about stuff, which is not to say we don't disagree about stuff, but like I don't feel like there's like any real creative beefs we ever have. That I feel like it's the kind of thing that happens if you've already been like used to writing on your own for so long. Because I always had a writing partner, even before I knew what a writing partner was, and before Pat and I became writing partners. Just when I was making my awful feature-length films, it just seemed boring to be doing it by myself. I wanted somebody there to kind of bounce ideas off of, even if one of my friend Nick, or my early writing partners, my friend Nick, who now works, he's like an investment banker, so had no plans to do anything creative. His joke was always that I was writing the movie and he was just sitting there so I could like tell him what it was about. But I still thought that was really useful. I mean, not like I can't work when I'm by myself. But I just think it's helpful to have someone to talk to. Like, I don't necessarily think everyone should have a writing partner, because the downside of that is that you have to split all your paychecks. So especially if you live in like LA or New York, where the cost of living is already pretty high, it does suck, especially when you're starting out and getting paid crap, to have to split that 50-50 with somebody.
Because they don't pay you twice as much if there's two of you.
No, well, and that's the thing we learned about the difference between the Writers Guild and the Directors Guild. Is the Directors Guild frowns upon partnerships, and they actually make it very hard to get approved to be a direct team. We discovered when we finally had to go do that, Pat and I. But part of how DGA works is even when you're a team, you still get paid individually. And I know that that's something that a lot of people in the Writers Guild would like to get changed moving forward. Even if you're not paid as two individual people, that you get paid more. The downside of that is that's part of why Hollywood loves writing teams, especially in TV, is it's an easy way to get more people in your writer's room without having to spend more money.
Oh, I never thought of it that way.
And I realize I kind of strayed from part of your original question.
No.
How we work is neither of us really specializes in anything. And I always think it would be interesting if we did. I don't know if that would make us more productive or not. But we're basically, over the years, I think we've gotten better at it too. I feel like in the past 6 or 7 years, we've gotten really good at feeling like there are two people, like we're producing more than just one person could,
right?
Which we were maybe guilty of when we first started out. It didn't feel like we were as productive as having two of us there.
Gotcha.
But now it's like we're working on 2 scripts right now. So some days one of us will be working on one of the movies while the other one's on the other one. And Pat actually has been making a joke that he'll go, we use a program called Writer Duet. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not, no.
It basically works like Google Docs or anything. Like it exists on the cloud, and it's a way for 2 people to be writing on something at the same time, whether we're together or both at our separate houses.
Oh, nice.
The joke that sometimes he'll like get up and he'll open it and discover that magic elves have written part of the movie for him. And it does kind of feel like that.
That's always a nice feeling.
Because normally we work together. So now it's like we don't even necessarily know what scenes the other one's working on.
Oh, so you try to work together in the same room?
When we're not being forced to quarantine, yeah.
Right.
We usually, I know some writing teams work like literally at the same time. Like they're both looking at the same screen, typing out the dialogue. We don't work that way. Like we'll outline together, and then even if we're in the same physical space, once we're actually writing, we're working on different scenes, and we're just kind of sitting there quietly.
Got it. Yeah, it makes sense. I don't know if I'd be able to ever work like literally right next to somebody staring at the same screen while one of you watches as the other.
Nuts.
Yeah.
Like, we're on the same team, so it's not like we're being like secretive or competitive, but like I just can't. For whatever reason, it weirds me out if someone's like watching what I'm doing.
Yeah, I don't like that either.
I just be like, wait till I'm done with the scene and then I'll show it to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like somebody watching you while you're trying to pee.
Totally. And like I used to draw a lot when I was growing up, and that was one of my big pet peeves, is if someone was like standing over my shoulder watching me draw. And I've had people ask like, why does that bother you? And I'm like, I don't know.
It's just a thing, man. I feel the same way. Yeah.
It's just like, it's not done yet. They're like, are you worried that like I'm judging like what you're doing? Like I think it's bad. And I'm like, no, I don't know. I've never really psychoanalyzed it. I just don't like it.
Mm-hmm. No, me too. So it's a subconscious thing. I don't like it. So how are you spending this other than writing? Are you watching or binging anything worthwhile, either movies or shows or books wise, to pass the time?
Well, I'm in a horror book club with some other industry people. We call it the Losers Book Club because we're super clever. But which was funny because part of why I wanted to start this book club was that years ago it dawned on me that I love horror. I don't get to make as many like horror projects myself as I would like to. A lot of people just view us as comedy guys, which we're trying to not get away from, but bust out from a little bit. But yeah, I host this horror screening series. It's my favorite genre, but I didn't read a lot of horror. I mostly read like sci-fi and fantasy and like nonfiction. So starting this book club with my friend Chelsea Stardust, who made Satanic Panic.
Very cool. Yeah, I spoke to Chelsea on the show.
Oh, great. Yeah, but that just seemed like a fun thing to do. So I'm reading that right now. We're reading The Exorcist.
Nice.
Ever read?
I have it. I have not read it yet, but I heard Ryan Turek talking about it on Shockwaves and how different the little differences between the book and the movie, which apparently fascinating.
Adaptation of the movie, like you're not like I'm like, oh, here's this character, here's that scene. But you know, like anything, it just goes into further detail, and is almost more fucked up in a lot of ways, even as fucked up as the movie is.
Oh, yeah.
But as far as watching, I'm trying to think. Because I can't do my Friday Night Fright screenings, I just decided, mostly for my own amusement. But I was inspired by my girlfriend KJ. Her and her friend Suki started Instagram account called Remote Viewing, I think it's called, where they just recommend double features to watch, but specifically with the idea that they're highlighting like streaming services that are free. Because obviously everybody has Netflix, but maybe if you recommend that something's on HBO or Criterion, it's like people don't necessarily have those. Right. So it's kind of, but like, I don't know if you ever watched Tubi, which is kind of the greatest streaming app ever. Like it has ads, but I'm fine with that. But it's like they have so much weird and good stuff on there.
Yeah, they seem like they have everything. Anytime I'm looking for something and I do that Apple TV search function where it searches across everything like HBO Now and Tubi has everything that I can't find anywhere else.
And I like recommending stuff that's on like Hoopla or Canopy, which are both public library things.
Oh, that's cool.
That everyone has access to if you have a library card, which everyone can get and sign up online. But anyway, on Friday Night Frights, LA, my Instagram account, and Twitter, I've just been kind of recommending horror double features that are free to everyone or are on Shudder. I feel like horror fans should have Shudder. I don't mind recommending.
Oh, yeah.
Even though that's a pay service that maybe everyone doesn't have. But everyone should, damn it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Everybody should have Shudder for sure. Well, that's cool. That there's a real art to pairing up double features for sure, as you well know, obviously.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm mostly just doing it to amuse myself. But I know that some people are like, oh, hey, yeah, I should rewatch that. Like I just recommended for Easter a zombie double feature of Return of the Living Dead and Dead Heat.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't seen Dead Heat. Steve worked on that one.
Oh, yeah, Steve Johnson. It's like, I thought you meant Steve Scarlata, my podcast.
Oh, no. Steve Johnson.
Like, what? No, he was like in high school then or something. No, yeah, and that's I just only brought that up because even though I'm mostly doing it to amuse myself, I got a lot of feedback from people who are like, "Oh man, I forgot about that movie or had never seen it." So
very cool.
It's fun to recommend.
Nice. So last few questions. Obviously, when it comes to screenwriting and filmmaking, there's so many books and resources out there. It's very easy to get lost, and a lot of them are just kind of not so good. You had recommended that one book,
Good Scripts, Bad Scripts by Tom Hope.
Yeah. Were there any other?
I don't know. I wonder if that's. I'd be curious to look that up on Amazon. I don't know if that's still in
I feel
print.
like I've seen it before. It sounds really familiar. I feel like I've come across it. Were there any other resources or books that were formidable for you that you would recommend?
I mean, I think everyone, again, I don't remember. It's been so long since I've read Good Scripts, Bad Scripts. That might, I don't know if it's good. It just might be that thing that, everybody needs their like kind of first taste.
Right.
And that was just the one that kind of opened the barn doors for me. But everyone who's interested in movies should definitely read William Goldman's Adventures in the Screen Trade. Just because it's just such a good book. It's just like a fun, warts and all exploration of what it's like to be a screenwriter. Granted, what it's like to be the highest paid Oscar-winning screenwriter of the 70s and early 80s, which is a good book. And I mean, William Goldman in particular, another thing, along with like before Good Scripts, Bad Scripts, and before I read Adventures in the Screen Trade, kind of my first real taste with behind the scenes stuff. Cause I grew up, like the internet existed in the 90s, but it's like, I don't know, I wasn't a tech kid. I wasn't going on AOL or anything. I didn't really look at the internet until college. And I didn't really have movie magazines. Like I'd seen like Entertainment Weekly, but that's just kind of like populist, celebrity driven stuff and movie reviews. But like I'm sure most kids who your family knew you liked movies, so that just meant every birthday and Christmas present you ever got from aunts and uncles were just like, you like movies, here's a movie thing.
Yep. Somebody
got me the very generically titled 4 Screenplays by William Goldman. And I think it's Princess Bride, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Misery, and maybe Marathon Man. I don't quite remember the 4, but it's 4 screenplays by William Goldman. And before each one, he just wrote like a little essay of his memories of working on that script and movies. And that really blew my mind. I was just like, and then, that led me then to like actually go to the magazine section at like Barnes and Noble and stuff and find magazines like Premiere and stuff, which don't exist anymore.
I used to intern for Premiere.
Really?
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. My first, like day one, they were writing an article about the best sex scenes in movies, and I had to fact check their descriptions of all of these sex scenes. Day one. It was awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, I had to watch the vampire lesbian sex scene from The Hunger. It's not technically a sex scene. It's more of a love scene, but there was the other the scene with Indiana Jones when he's pointing to where it hurts on his body. Yeah, there were a few more, but yeah, it was a hell of a first day.
That's fun. Fun aside.
Yeah,
but yeah,
definitely.
just like that was then when I started kind of tracking down and reading more academic stuff and just, behind the scenes stuff about making movies.
Cool. Well, cool. Josh, it was a real pleasure talking to you, man. I feel like we've crossed paths a couple times at Fangoria parties and maybe Monster Palooza. I feel like we've had a couple words here and there, but good to finally talk to you on a longer timeline.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot. Any parting wisdom for those aspiring filmmakers and screenwriters out there?
Just again, gotta make shit and get it out there so it's technically findable for people to see. And always stick with it. I definitely know it's harder to stick with it for some people than other people. I think writing is at least easier than like acting or directing or something, that as far as that you can just kind of have a job and do it on the side and keep keep hoping that something will click. But I think it's always nice to find a thing that no one can stop you from doing, that you don't need to get paid, whether it's just kind of writing short stories or starting a comic and just putting it up online, having that creative outlet, keeping that candle in the window.
Yeah, you got to keep that blade sharp.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, on that note, Josh, thank you again, and
thank you.
Stay safe and well.
You too, Zach.
All right, here as always are some key takeaways from this conversation with Josh Miller. Number 1, make something. Anything. Josh's start came from having no contacts or major footholds in the industry at all. Instead, he made a super low budget feature in college called Stop Stabbing Me, and regardless of how good it was, ultimately it led him to get recognition, which over time yielded his eventual career success. A lot of would-be filmmakers get held up on perfectionism and waiting for the perfect project instead of just fucking making something. Yes, it's important that your name be synonymous with quality, but when you're just starting out, all producers really want to know is that you can finish something and release it. That alone will enable you to stand above about 75% of the pack. So in the words of Robert Rodriguez, keep making shit. You never know where it can lead. Number 2, read good scripts and bad scripts. As a screenwriter, Josh reads a ton of scripts, and as important as it is to seek out good scripts, it's almost as important to seek out and read bad scripts. A bad script allows you to have a higher level of consciousness about the pitfalls of screenwriting, like lame dialogue, bad storytelling, lack of tension, etc. It's critical to identify these things so you can avoid them, and the best way to do that is to get acquainted with what makes a bad script bad by reading bad scripts. So the next time you see a movie and realize it had a bad script, find the screenplay, track it down, read it, and analyze for yourself what went wrong and what you would have done to have fixed it. I personally find that journaling about what you don't like about certain movies or certain scripts is a great way to avoid mistakes when it comes time for you to sit down and write. Number 3, stick with it. Josh got to write the script for an epic production like Sonic the Hedgehog, but it came after years of trying to break through with multiple projects. Josh stayed the course, built his contacts, stayed on the radar of important people, and simply didn't give up for over 10 years, and here he is. Of course, success like this is never guaranteed, but failure is once you throw in the towel. After writing Sonic, Josh is heralding Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and I don't want to start a rumor, but it's on Wikipedia, so I guess I can say it. Looks like Josh is penning the Untitled Ace Ventura sequel. Fingers crossed. In any event, Josh's story is similar to many directors in how it is one of endurance and momentum. Keep at it and stay the course. Anyway, guys, thank you as always for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, why not share it with your friends and family on social media? Don't forget to follow the show on Instagram at I'm Nick Taylor and on Twitter at the same handle. Thanks again for listening to the Nick Taylor Horror Show.